We'd like to give a special shout out to the following people for making this episode and the rest of Act 3 possible: Louis, Malaya, Reg, Daniel Athern, Osterkim, Vanna, Finch, Dr. Dan Venning, Sleepless Berry, Court, Rogue Canoe, John and Muna, Sadie, Zay the Great, Elliot Kane, and Trident. Thank you for your support. Maraming salamat. You're listening to Hainai by Motzie Dapul. Hilaga, Part 1.
I met up with my new friend today. The old man. You remember. Since he seems to know a lot about the topic, I wanted to ask him what he knows about the long winter. The thing all the elders seem to fear or are cautious of. I, of course, also let him know what happened in Christmas, and he very calmly, terrifying eyes aside, asked me to make sure to keep a secret. Which, well, obviously. Wouldn't want all hell to break loose, and that man's got enough hellfire to spare. To be fair, though, he probably would have looked more terrifying if he wasn't wearing this adorable hand-knitted scarf that a certain someone clearly worked very hard to give him. Softened him up some when I complimented it. You know, I met him, actually. The guy who gave him that scarf. I wasn't even looking for the guy, I just met him, and I see it, you know? I get it. How such a cold, powerful old man, so disconnected from his own humanity for so long, could find his warmth again. But, given his history, I also understand where the cold comes from. After everything he's done, what else could he be but cold? I told him about the long winter, and wanted to understand why the elders were so afraid of it. I told him about Clarence Thompson, at least what I was told about him, and his death. I was very surprised to learn what actually killed Clarence Thompson. It, apparently, wasn't the long winter at all. No, in fact, it was one very dangerous and powerful man. A man who lived among those Clarence Thompson would have taken, thinking they would not be missed. Vagrants, the poor and the vulnerable. A man who knew some of them by name, who noticed when they were taken. A man who walked into a blizzard, intending vengeance, surprised to find a near-empty cabin, and Clarence Thompson, alone, recovering from his death on the floor. When he went down the stairs to find the bodies of those who did not survive Clarence Thompson's torture, he knew what he had to do. He used to hunt a long time ago, in another life. He knew how to process a carcass, had experience skinning rabbits and deer from when he was young. They were usually dead when he did this, and Thompson was exactly that when he began his work. Though he did not stay that way. I asked him then, If it wasn't the long winter that did that to Clarence Thompson, why then was it so feared by those that worshipped fear? And the old man sighed, sat beside me, and he spoke of Sauvard, the leader of elders, a man who conquered fear, used it for power, a man who seemed to fear nothing. So when he warned of what he saw in the long winter, well, the elders knew to take it to heart. A long time ago, Sauvard embarked on an expedition to the far north. He brought men with him, 2 elders, 12 hired hands. A couple of locals met them at the border, agreed to lead them to where their leader wanted to go, but they refused to go past a certain point and could not be swayed. One was an interpreter, a young man who seemed nervous around the money gentleman, while the other, a quiet, older fellow, who spoke only in the local tongue when they spoke at all. And when they spoke, it was when the party heard the rumbling of snow shifting on the nearby mountaintops, when the wind howled in the night, or when they heard strange, distant, echoing cries. The most disturbing of them had the fellow give short, sensible explanations, animals that sounded uncannily like people, the way the wind would whistle in these conditions. But of the one Sauvard could have easily explained away, well, the rumbling, they said, that must have been shifting snow, was the shuddering breath of a troubled sleep. The natural springs in the middle of the freeze, they said, was where its tears and spittle flowed. And when they saw the great aurora of the north, lighting the long nights in their path further away from civilization, the older fellow said, "For that which had no eyes, there was much to see." It was, for some, the superstition of a strange people. But for Sauvard, it was an assurance that he was on the right path. For what he was looking for was characteristic of the man who vied ever yet more for power. He had heard of some deposit of ore that his friends in the mining industry had wanted to get at, but any and all attempts at starting an operation failed spectacularly. Something or other always kept them away. Equipment failures, an accident with the foreman, an unexpected suicide from one of the financiers. It was, as Mr. Henry, who kept a close eye on Sauvard's affairs and the affairs of his peers, had said, quite a remarkable string of misfortunes. To Sauvard, it seemed a great opportunity. There was something supernatural at that sight, something powerful, something that did not want to be discovered, but that surely a great man like Sauvard could unearth and use for his own ends. When they arrived close to the site, their 2 guides refused to go further. The younger one said it was a matter of safety, that the area was perilous for many, and they knew to stay away. The older one, however, seemed to sense something in Sauvard, and asked him to come aside, with only their companion to translate their words. "You believe in power and its strangeness, yet still you seek what sleeps here in the north," said they, through the mouth of an uncertain youth, wishing to speak their words plain. "There is no wilderness we cannot conquer without knowledge," said Sauvard. and all he got in return was laughter from the fellow who, it seemed, understood him just fine. And what he was told in turn was that knowledge was the very reason they would not guide them further. The old fellow said they would pray for him, for he paid well and did not treat them ill, but that they did not expect to see them all again. Sauvard believed he would prove them wrong. He was only barely right. They were given detailed directions and a map of the area, well documented for a place they claimed they would not enter. When they traveled through a copse of thick evergreens, they saw a great, yawning pit open up before them, so great in size that it would have taken them a day to circumnavigate. So deep was this pit that they could not see the bottom, for the fog that rose and lingered like clouds. There seemed to be a narrow path down one side, a rough-shod stone road that contradicted the local claim that they all knew to stay away. But to be fair to their guides, the path seemed ancient, and so required care and study. One of his elder companions, Caring was his name, used the spell, the spectral eye, that he had mastered from Richard Henry, and had used to great effect and over great distances. He sent the eye down into the depths to see what lay beyond the fog. It took hours, through which Caring sat unmoving in his tent, focused solely on the task at hand, while the rest set up their camp, taking records and photographs of the great pit's maw. When Sauvard went to check on the man hours later, he found Caring in the same spot, sitting on his bedroll and staring blankly ahead, one eye covered with a patch, a trick they learned early on that helped with the difficulty of having multiple fields of vision. He was still unmoving, but Sauvard saw his hand shaking and asked if he was cold. He did not respond. Sauvard asked again, louder and firmer, knowing from Mr. Henry that a spell of eyes did not make one hard of hearing. Still, nothing. Only when Sauvard thought to ask, "What do you see?" was there a change. Caring's single exposed eye swiveled to look at him, and his breath became shallow, and the veins of his brow twitched above the patch. The man's mouth opened as if to speak, but he simply took air, mouth opening and closing like he couldn't find the words. And then the man began to whimper, whine, like something was distressing him. The whines turned to groans, turned to screams, and finally, his shaking hands began to claw at his own face, ripping the patch off and revealing to Sauvard a sight he would not soon forget. Caring's eye seemed to dance in its socket in double, triple time, darting to 1,000 sights at once without a single thing to focus on. He had to hold the man down as he tore skin with his nails, his goal not simply to remove the patch, but, it seemed, the eye itself. His cries were anomalous indeed, for Sauvard was well known for his calm, his control over every situation, and one of their crew came to hold Caring down while Sauvard fetched the medic, who was able to stop his fits of self-inflicted violence with chloroform. When the medic tended to his fresh wounds and checked on him, he found his eyes still darting around, seeing too much too fast, and unable to stop. Even when Sauvard and his other elder companion, Hammond, attempted to dispel Caring's spectral eye, it did not stop his real one from its dance, while his other remained frighteningly still. All they could do was leave Caring as he was, though they used rope to strap him down for when he awoke, and might try to harm himself once again. The night came fast this far north, and they would begin their journey down in the morning, though they had already begun taking samples to ascertain what might be mined. It was promising enough, but what Sauvard deemed even more promising was Caring, even as disturbing as his reaction was. It was proof positive that there was something worthwhile beneath the fog. Perhaps itself a reaction of heat with a deep cold of what seemed to be a long and unabating winter. There was something there, something of great, supernatural power Sauvard might be able to harness, should they find a safer way to investigate it. When it came to their evening meal, Hammond took Sauvard aside and told him that Caring had awoken when he took him his supper. He was calm, hazy from the barbiturates the doctor prepared for him, and when Hammond attempted to interrogate him about what he saw in the pit, the only slurring words that came from his mouth were fire and the second word repeated over and over and over, faster and faster, until it became like the quiet clicking of a distant engine, or the chuffing of a strange bird, or a disturbed, nigh inhuman laugh. And Sauvard was almost tempted to try and glimpse what was beneath the fog himself, but wisdom held him back, as he and Hammond decided upon a different approach. He visited Caring one last time that night, and was surprised, yet relieved, to find that his eyes were both open and entirely still, staring at Sauvard as he entered the tent. He asked Caring how he felt, if he was able to take some supper after his fits. Caring said nothing, only staring at him in the eerie, chill silence. Sauvard tested the waters, asking him what he saw down below that affected him so. Still, Caring did not answer, staring intently. For an entire, silent minute, the man did not blink, and Sauvard came over, touching one of his eyes' lids and examining the pupil. Still, there was no response. Eyes fixed on Sauvard, though when he pulled away, intending to have the man examined by their medic, Caring smiled. It was not a smile that he had ever seen on the man's face. More than anything, it reminded Sauvard, briefly, of the indulgent smile his wife, God bless her soul, once gave their son when he was very little, and seemed intent on putting himself in harm's way without a single thought. The pitying smile of one who knew better, who was amused by the ignorance of an infant, knowing they would have been long dead if not for the care of others, and the pure, chaotic luck of the universe. Before Sauvard could say a word about it, Caring's eyes rolled to the back of his head, and the strange smile disappeared. Before his hands began to shake again, held fast by the rope, and he took in labored breaths, one eye returning Sauvard's gaze while the other began its frenzied dance once more. "We shouldn't have come here," said Caring, in a despairing whisper. His one eye fixed on Sauvard began to fill with tears, and Sauvard promised him a strong dose of barbiturates to help him sleep soundly before asking what it was that he saw down below in the fog. Everything, said Caring, seemingly with all his strength. There's not. It seemed impossible for him to struggle further into sensibility, so Sauvard kept his promise and had the doctor administer a strong dose for his rest. The night passed with a now familiar screaming of the wind in the trees, and in the morning, Caring was gone. Any trace of his leaving buried under freshly fallen snow. If Sauvard had been a wiser man, that should have been the end of the expedition, a sign to cut their losses and return. But still, they ventured down, taking the ancient path down with as much speed as they could manage without risking their lives unnecessarily. It was, in part, a search for Caring, though they feared he simply walked off one edge and plunged to his death, though such a thing did not seem likely for an elder who had more means to survive a fall than most. It took them hours, but they finally reached the fog, taking recording equipment along with them, and samples along the way. Hammond was on high alert, a protective charm affixed to his breast, sticking close to Sauvard and periodically looking down into the great, obscured emptiness below. Sauvard sensed magic in their vicinity, growing stronger and stronger as they descended. But it felt strange in its presence, so vague as to be impossible to track, despite its constancy, like an electric hum. The magic, it doesn't feel like it's below us, but it feels stronger the lower we go, said Hammond, and Sauvard found himself with the uncanny feeling of being watched. Not behind him, not before him. No. It was as though he was seen, in his entirety, from every direction, like the fog, though never in shape, bore the quality of 10,000 eyes, trained on him and his companion, and the few workers that came down with them, while some others guarded the camp above against wild animals. He might have taken this as a sign if Sauvard were not a stubborn man. Surely, he thought, this would all be worth the journey, the effort he put into financing and coordinating such an important expedition. Surely the magic he felt, without a doubt, that his elder companion felt just as strongly, had a source that they could access and mine. And perhaps it did. Perhaps they would have even found it, had they gone further. But it was at that moment that the ground shook, and above and below, the crashing of stones and ice loosed by the sudden tremor threw their party into chaos. Sauvard held fast to the solid stone that seemed unmoved by the cacophonous rumbling, but at his side, Hammond was not so lucky. He was struck by a stone, one among many, solidly across the temple, and Sauvard watched blood bloom and flow from the wound as Hammond stumbled, and the ground gave way beneath him. Another man, large and hale, grabbed Hammond's arm before he was lost, and Sauvard tried to reach down to help the man pull him up. It was in this attempt he saw Hammond look pale, eyes wide and wet with fresh blood. He looked more than panicked, terrified. Terrified of death, it was clear, but more than that, terrified at what he saw. His eyes fixed on something past either man who was trying to save him. It was like he was looking at something so frightening that it was all he could see. And he screamed such a piercing scream before pushing them both away, loosing their grip so violently that the strong man's fingers were dislocated where he'd been holding him. Hammond did not scream when he fell. Only the strong man did, when he was forced to let Hammond go, and only briefly in pain, cradling his injured hand as he cried desperately, "Why did he do it? Why did he do it? Why, when we had him?" In the mere seconds Sauvard had watched it all unfold, he had seen that Hammond had plunged silently, barely in sight as a vision of red, before the fog ate him right up. They waited for the shaking to abate before Sauvard took the strong man's hand and, without hesitation, set his fingers back into place with a violent pull. It was an undeniably painful process, but would benefit the man in the long run, ensuring they were properly affixed before his fingers would swell and make the healing much harder. When they did a head count, they found that one other man was gone as well, though nobody caught him like they did Hammond. Not that that made a difference. One of the men said they needed to go back, get to safety, treat the wounded, and Sauvard almost argued against it. They were in the fog, so close to discovering what was beneath it. But in a moment of clarity, Hammond's bloodied eyes and his last look of horror flashed before Sauvard's vision, accompanied by the grim words Caring had imparted the night before his disappearance. "We shouldn't have come here." And with one last look at the men behind him, including the one cradling his injured hand, Sauvard relented, and they began their ascent. In the distance, echoing such that he did not know if it came from below, above, or across the pit, he heard the chittering of a strange bird, like the laughter of something nigh inhuman. The somber atmosphere of the evening meal was palpable, though the men knew of the dangers. They collected the dead men's things, separated out supplies from personal effects to use or take home to their families. It was not known what they should do with Caring's things, for they did not see him die, but they doubted he still lived. Every sound in the night seemed now to carry a strange and creeping dread, as Sauvard remembered their old guide's words. For that which had no eyes, there was much to see. When Sauvard went to sleep that night, he dreamt that he was falling, though he did not fear the fall. He dreamt that he was surrounded, shrouded, embraced not by a physical force, but by the strange, electric sensation of being gazed upon, felt without feeling, tasted and known by none but the fog that surrounded him. And when the fog cleared, his eyes were not enough, not to take in what he saw. He felt a great heat touch his skin and engulf the backs of his eyes, and he saw, and he saw, And he saw, and only by the grace of waking, taking away the memory of dream beyond its barest shape, did Sauvard wake sane.
You're listening to Hainai by Motzie Dapul. Hey everyone, it's Motzie. This isn't news to anyone, but Israel has continued to kill civilians en masse and has violated the ceasefire. Israeli forces killed 300 people in one night. They also targeted and killed first responders in ambulances and fire trucks. Hossam Shabbat was an Al Jazeera journalist that Israeli forces killed in these attacks, alongside Mohammed Mansour, a journalist for Palestine Today. This week, Academy Award-winning Palestinian documentary filmmaker Hamdan Balal was also violently attacked and beaten by Israeli settlers and kidnapped by Israeli forces, and was released the day after his Israeli co-director, Yuval Abraham, spoke out against the attack. The cruel and violent genocide and apartheid of Palestinians by Israel has been allowed to continue. The only reason I talk about this now is not because I think it changes anything, but because I want to keep a record of their war crimes and crimes against humanity as they happen. Justice can be slow, but achievable, and every IDF soldier and Israeli government official that has contributed to this genocide must be held accountable. So I continue to make updates to remind people what they are and what they've done. Thank you for listening. Maraming salamat. Ingat.
Hey everyone, this is Motzie, creator of Hainai. Hainai is a podcast produced by myself, Yoi Hilaga, and Alyssa Jimenez, and co-created by Reg Helly, and licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 International License. This episode was co-produced by Jesse Goodsell, and written and directed by myself, and I also play the role of Mari Datuin. If you'd like to chat with other listeners when this episode goes live, we do a live premiere 3 Sundays a month at 9 p.m. EST or Toronto time on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/HainaiPod. To help support the production of Hainai, you can subscribe to our Patreon, patreon.com/HainaiPod. You'll get to be part of our early access program, where we release episodes 3 days early on Thursday at 9 p.m. EST or Toronto time. You can also get bonus video, audio, art, and many more. Speaking of Patreon, we'd love to give a shout out to the following patrons for all their amazing support.
Pollo, Nat Dwight, Phoenix Luna, Kate Jordan, Tiana Harvey, Drakukard, Sabine, Sean, Sharon Poplinski, Josh the Alchemist, Jess Snow, Maddie Armigio, Talon, Alan Weberin, Nanette Dapul, Mika, Matthew Upton, Anna, Sooks, Becca Terrier, Amelia Brownstein, Diana Cause, Melissa, Emma Heilig, Faye Fungi, Pablo Neurotic, Oster Kim, Evie Smith, Megan, Jesse Goodsell, Malaya Light, and Victoria Goodwin.
If you can't subscribe monthly, you have the option to buy us a milk tea on coffee, ko-fi.com/HainaiPod. Supporting us financially is a big part of how we're able to keep going as a show, and supports the writing, editing, directing, voice acting, and all the other hard work that goes into the show. So please consider supporting us financially if you can, and getting ad-free episodes and bonus episodes in the process. Those who support us at the $10 tier and above on Patreon get bonus episodes every month. For more news and updates, you can check out our website, hainaipod.com, or follow us on our socials, on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky. Hainai is available on Acast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you listen to podcasts. We hope you enjoy our Act 3 episodes, And as always, thank you, we love you, and hanggang sa muli.